In January 2013, the Philippines unilaterally filed a case against China at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. The issue focuses on a dispute over maritime jurisdiction in the South China Sea. China is not participating in the case, stating it will not accept any solution involving a third-party settlement of its territorial sovereignty and its maritime rights. China has also made it clear that its dispute with the Philippines should be resolved through bilateral talks. Nevertheless, the court is expected to issue a ruling next week. We begin with CCTV correspondent Ho Na, who joins us now from Beijing. And Ho Na, can you tell us more about why the Chinese government is not taking part in this arbitration case and why it says it will not accept the court's ruling?
Well, China said on Thursday the decision of the South China Sea arbitration would not affect its territorial integrity or maritime rights in the South China Sea. China and the Philippines originally reached consensus to settle their dispute over the South China Sea through negotiation, and this consensus is in accordance with the Declaration on the Conduct of the Parties in the South China Sea, known as the DOC, signed by China and ASEAN member states, including the Philippines, in 2002. However, on January the 23rd, 2013, the Philippines unilaterally initiated the arbitration in violation of its agreements with China. So China rejects the court's ruling because the DOC explicitly states that the parties concerned undertake to resolve their territorial and jurisdictional disputes by peaceful means through friendly consultations and negotiations by sovereign states directly concerned, in accordance with the universally recognized principles of international law, including the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, known as the UNCLOS. The UNCLOS allows for exclusion to arbitration, and in 2006, China made a declaration excluding disputes concerning maritime delimitation, historic bay or titles, military activities, and law enforcement activities. The Philippines went ahead with arbitration without any consultation or negotiations with China. So China says the arbitration cannot be fair because it's illegal. Anand.
Has China gained much international support for its stance on the issue?
Well, some African and European nations and members from international organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the ASEAN have voiced their support of China's stance that such territorial disputes should be handled through bilateral negotiations. With a ruling in the South China Sea arbitration case set to be unveiled next week, an increasing number of countries have echoed China's position, expressing concern about what it calls the expansion and abuse of power of the arbitral tribunal in The Hague. Over 60 countries have voiced support for China, including India, Russia, Kenya, and several regional organizations such as the Arab League. Back to you.
Thank you. That's CCTV's Ho Na reporting from Beijing. And for more perspective, joining me now from Beijing is Zhang Junxi. He is Senior Captain and Vice President for the Naval Research Institute in China, and he's a former Deputy Naval Officer at the Chinese Embassy in the United States. Also with us from Islamabad is Masood Khan. He is the Director and CEO of the Institute of Strategic Studies in Pakistan, and he's a former ambassador to China. With me here in Washington is Saurabh Gupta. He is a Senior Fellow at the Institute for China-America Studies. Also joining us from Nairobi is Wilson Muna. He is the Director of Research at the Africa Policy Institute. Welcome to all of you to the show. Zhang Junxi, let me start with you. China has taken a very strong stand on this South China arbitration case. The former Chinese state councillor Dai Bingguo said at a recent event in Washington, D.C. that on issues of sovereignty, China will never accept any solution that is imposed on it by a third party. And he said that the ruling, and I'm quoting here, will amount to nothing more than a piece of paper. Can you tell us why China is not participating in this arbitration case or accepting the results?
Well, I think China's position accords with international law. First, the essence of the subject matter of the South China Sea arbitration unilaterally initiated by the Philippines is the sovereignty over some maritime features in the South China Sea. We know that territorial sovereignty falls beyond the scope of UNCLOS. That means the arbitral tribunal has no jurisdiction over this case. This is the first. And second, that China, as a sovereign state, has the right to choose the dispute settlement method. So without the consent of China, the Philippines unilaterally initiated the arbitration. That means it deprives China of the right, according to the international law, of choosing a dispute settlement regime. And there are some other reasons that we won't agree with the Philippines.
Right, Zhang Junxi, China has also expressed another concern. It has cautioned against countries in the region using arbitration as an excuse to take provocative action. Is there a possibility that there could be escalating tensions or instability in the region as a result of this?
I'm afraid that some country may use the award of the arbitration as an excuse to meddle in the South China Sea. We know that before 2009, when the United States adopted the new strategy of rebalancing the Asia-Pacific, I think the situation in the South China Sea was, generally speaking, was stable. All the claimants in the South China Sea dispute maintained or exercised great restraint, and the situation had been calm. But in recent years, when the United States came back to Asia, it used the South China Sea dispute as an excuse to interfere in the South China Sea. In the South China Sea. So we are not sure that whether the United States will take the award as an excuse to meddle in the South China Sea issue.
Ambassador Khan, China's stance on the dispute in the South China Sea is to, quote, remain committed to a peaceful resolution through negotiations and consultations with those involved directly. What is Pakistan's view on that?
Pakistan has supported China's stance openly in the international forums and also in the regional fora. But we also believe that other countries in the region, the ASEAN countries, or even the United States of America, they also want a peaceful resolution of the disputes. China's stance is that it's a sovereignty issue, but there are some disputes which can be resolved bilaterally, and there has been some arrangement of sorts with ASEAN countries, with other claimants and disputants. And I think that that would be a wiser course of action, because we think that the entire South China Sea dispute or disputes should not be allowed to escalate the situation. And the United States-China relationship, which is multidimensional, and they have a strategic and economic dialogue to promote this relationship, should not be reduced to the South China Sea issues.
Sohrab, let's look at the role of the United States in this. The United States is not a claimant in the region, nor is it a signatory to UNCLOS, that's the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. So why is the United States supporting the Philippines in this arbitration case, and why is it asking China to accept the ruling?
The United States is supporting the Philippines in this arbitration case from the context of supporting international law more broadly. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and maritime law generally is still fairly young and in its developing phase. The United States would prefer that all countries which sign, or even if they do not sign these agreements, but adhere to international customary law in the area in the maritime sphere, adhere to those agreements so that there is good order at sea and peaceful order at sea, and that these matters can be resolved without the use of force or the threat of use of force. That having been said, I mean, the most important missing factor out here is the United States' own signature and ratification to the UNCLOS Treaty. Over and above that, frankly, the United States' interests in the South China Sea are fairly limited. And when I talk interests, I talk in terms of its navigational interests. It has defense obligations, but those obligations also are fairly marginal compared to the obligations in Northeast Asia.
Its navigation interests have not been interfered with.
Absolutely not. Frankly, this is the ironic factor. Commercial navigation has never been interfered going back decades. And in terms of military navigation, China's position on military navigation in the South China Sea is no different from any of the other claimants in the South China Sea, or frankly, practically all the littoral states of Asia and the Asia Pacific. So in that regard, China does not stand out as an objectionable factor in any regard. China is just same as the other countries. So overall, navigation has not been impeded in any way whatsoever, and the possibility that it would is marginal, if not totally absent, simply because China is the single largest trading power and it uses the seas for its own purposes and interests.
Zhang Junxi, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesman, noted that China's stance on this arbitration case helps, and I'm quoting here again, safeguard the dignity and authority of international law. There was also a recent commentary piece in Xinhua, the Chinese news agency, which noted that China is defending not only its territorial sovereignty, but world peace and stability when fighting against the obstinacy displayed in the South China Sea arbitration. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Well, just as I have said a moment ago, that the reason why China takes a stance neither to accept nor to take part in the arbitration. First is that the arbiter has no jurisdiction over this case. The second, China has the right to choose dispute settlement regime. Third, China and the Philippines have agreed to peacefully settle the dispute through negotiations and consultations. And this promise has been made in at least 5 agreements between the governments of China and the Philippines, and also made in DOC, the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, in 2002. China and the Philippines both signed the declaration. The declaration stipulates that all the South China Sea disputes should be settled peacefully through consultations and negotiations. So actually, by initiating the arbitration, the Philippines is breaking its promise and also is breaking the law. The third, I think China has made an announcement to exclude itself from the compulsory arbitration like this concerning maritime delimitation and other issues. So actually, the arbitral tribunal is against the international law. So China chooses the stance not to participate nor accept this case.